Hello everyone, this is Refresh and I'm here to take a look at the Ajani Valiant Protector Planeswalker deck from Aether Revolt. According to the back here, it has a ready-to-play 60-card deck featuring a foil premium Ajani Valiant Protector Planeswalker card, 2 Aether Revolt 15-card booster packs, a strategy insert, and a magic quick reference card. Let's go ahead and confirm that that is what is inside. Alright, there's your foil Planeswalker card. It's a little bent, but other than that, looks quite nice. We also have a deck box with Ajani himself on the cover, and if you can somehow get it open, inside you have the aforementioned 2 booster packs, just a little bit squished up, a quick reference guide. It gives you some of the most basic information about the game, as well as an advertisement for Magic Duels here. This is clearly extremely elementary and not the most helpful for anyone that has any experience playing this game, but for somebody who's just beginning, which is who this product is designed for, I could see it being of some limited use. We also have the strategy tip here. It appears that this deck is harnessing the Revolt mechanic to get a little bit of extra power, and it gives you some tips on how to improve the deck. And then you have a full deck list of all the cards here, including 22 lands, 16 spells, 21 creatures, and the 1 Planeswalker. On the back, you have some artwork and some information about Ajani himself and his story, so that's nice as well. I do wish that there was more than just 3 very simple paragraphs on how to play the deck. I do appreciate that it gives you the basics of what the deck is doing, but I kind of wish that there was a little bit more instruction on what all these different cards do for the deck and why you want them in the deck and what they're doing in the deck. Something more of an actual deck tech as opposed to just a really generic, quick summary of the most basic strategy of the deck. Would be quite nice here. Like a card by card breakdown of what everything is there in there and why. Let's go ahead and take a look at the actual cards that are inside. So we have another rare in Solemn Recruit, and then Ajani's special cards, which are Ajani's Aid, and it lets you search for Ajani himself, and then you can sacrifice this. It sits on the battlefield as an enchantment to prevent all combat damage a creature of your choice would deal this turn. So it basically blanks one creature's attack step, or defense as it is. Another rare in Aid from the Cowl, which is a pretty decent Revolt card for casual play. This is probably a card that's just for Ajani's deck, which puts a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. If you look at the Ajani card itself, that is in line with what Ajani is trying to do. We also have 3 of Ajani's Comrade, which is a card that gets a +1/+1 counter if you control Ajani, so it slowly gets better. It's actually a pretty decent rate as far as a random card is concerned, with a 2/2 for 2 that with trample that gets bigger if you control Ajani. Now let's leave this deck up, play it against its partner, and I'll get back to you with what I think of the deck. So I've had a little time to play this deck, both against Tezzeret and against some challenge decks, and I have some thoughts. Overall, the deck has 2 main themes that it's trying to go for. The first theme is Revolt, and you're going to see that on a whole bunch of the cards, from the Narnam Renegade all the way to Aid from the Cowl and Airdrop Aeronauts. The second theme that it's trying to go for, and that's somewhat connected to Revolt in a very light way, is +1/+1 counters. As you can see, the Narnam Renegade starts with a +1/+1 counter if it's revolted. Ajani's Comrade gets +1/+1 counters when Ajani is on the battlefield. You also have Inspiring Roar to put +1/+1 counters all over all your cards, and it seems like those are the 2 main things that it's going for. One that connects better with Ajani, which is the +1/+1 counter theme, and one that is just kind of thrown in there because that's one of the main mechanics of the set. How do they work together? I think it's so-so. The fact that Revolt triggers +1/+1 counters is cool, but it doesn't really show why Revolt is a powerful ability, right? For the most part in this deck, there's not a lot that you're actually trying to sacrifice, except for 5 cards at the 1-drop slot. 3 Renegade maps and 2 Unbridled Growths. The Unbridled Growths are mana fixers and you can just cycle them. Basically, you cast them on a land and you sacrifice them to draw a card. And in that sense, they actually have very, very little purpose because you don't even have that many spells that require a double mana. Except for the Solemn Recruit and these 2 5-drops and Aid from the Cowl, you're not really needing a double mana of one sort. And so you're not really suffering in terms of the need to fix your mana. And so it's a really odd inclusion, and I'd rather there be more cards that have a more specific purpose that you use them before they die. For example, if they had included more cards that are there just to straight attack and then die, and then get massive damage in that instant, then that I think would have been much more useful and on theme than Unbridled Growth, which literally does nothing for this deck except to sacrifice and draw a card, basically to cycle to trigger Revolt. Renegade Map at least can get you a land if you are stuck on lands, but Unbridled Growth doesn't even give you additional mana, it just fixes your mana. And so it seems like a really odd inclusion. The deck doesn't seem to want to sacrifice its creatures really in order to trigger Revolt either, because of the +1/+1 counter theme, specifically because of all the Inspiring Roars. You want to keep your creatures alive in order for you to be able to cast Inspiring Roar and get value from increasing the size of all your creatures. However, Revolt wants you to have your creatures die so that you can get the advantage off the Revolt. And I don't think that works especially well, except if you have Aid from the Cowl, and that only sometimes gets you a permanent. And so I don't think that Aid from the Cowl is an especially amazing card, since it only works on your turn, and it may not even do anything. And for 5 mana, when you lose one of your small drops, because of the fact that the curve is really low, and it's heavy on 2s especially, your odds of getting something that's better are very, very slim. You're most likely going to get an Audacious Infiltrator, a Verdant Automaton, or Ajani's Companion, more than anything else, when you lose a permanent while you have Aid from the Cowl on the battlefield. And so that's not all that impressive either. Furthermore, I think there are some weird concessions that this deck makes just to battle Tezzeret, specifically the Natural Obsolescence and the 3 Audacious Infiltrators, which neither of them have anything to do with this theme here, but what they do is they combat artifact decks. And I understand that this is supposed to be a partner to the Tezzeret deck, but I kind of wish that it had been crafted so that it was a little bit more independent. There are some good cards in this, however, that I think work well with what this deck is trying to do. In addition to the Inspiring Roar, the Ajani's Aid, for example, is a great example of a card that you can put on the battlefield, sacrifice it for a good effect, and also it gets you card advantage by getting you Ajani if you've discarded, if it's died, or if you had not yet drawn him. And so that's a really good card that's really on theme. The Armorcraft Judge draws you a bunch of cards for the +1/+1 counter creatures that you have. And some of the Revolt creatures, again, are very situational. I feel like Deadeye Harpooner only kills a tapped creature on Revolt, and Silkweaver Elite's Body is really disappointing for the fact that it can only sometimes net you an additional card. It's a 2/2 for 3 that sometimes gets you a card, which I don't feel like is really worth jumping through the hoops to get the Revolt trigger off of. Verdant Automaton is a surprisingly weak creature that gets counters, and I understand that it does work with the theme, but it feels a bit weak. However, I guess it fits better than the Audacious Infiltrators. And Engineered Might is just a pump spell. And I understand that you can use it to pump your whole team, but wouldn't it be better to have some sort of card that does more with a +1/+1 counter theme than just the one creature gets really huge or all your creatures get temporarily huge? Like, it doesn't seem to fit as well as the theme. And finally, Prey Upon, which is the one removal card put into this deck, really does not feel like a good removal card for a deck that is as low drop intensive as it is. Now, I understand that maybe the idea is that you 2-for-1 yourself in order to get a Revolt trigger, but those Revolt triggers are generally fairly disappointing or not especially impressive. And consequently, you don't really care that much about revolting except when it's very convenient. And that's one thing that this deck doesn't do very well. And that's why I don't love this deck. I feel like it's trying to split itself between doing too many things and doing most of those things not especially well. That said, when it does get going, this deck does have a capacity to seem like it's insurmountable. Like when you have a big board and you manage to put a whole bunch of +1/+1 counters on everything, and then you got Ajani going, making all your creatures bigger, it seems like it can do very well in those certain circumstances, but it's not really well suited to even get to those circumstances. And that's my major complaint with this deck. Let me know what you thought about this deck and your play experiences with this deck in the comments below. If you thought this video was helpful, hit the like button. If you'd like to see more such videos, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching. This was Refresh, and I will see you next time.